All right, good evening, everybody. We are going to turn to Genesis 48, and we're going to look at the end of that chapter and then make our way. Well, we don't have any choice. We've got to make our way all the way. Wherever we make it to will be the end of Genesis for us anyway. So, it's, Lord willing, we'll make it all the way to the end of chapter 50. And I just want to say at the outset, I have really enjoyed this quarter. Next Wednesday, I will be going back to the teenage, high school, young adult class. And I think it'll be my first time out of the adult class since March of the year we moved here. And so this has been studying through the whole Bible, teaching it with you has been incredible. And then now being able to teach with Gerald, it's been really good. And I've gained a lot from our work together. And I know Lonnie and Lucas are going to take this class over, and they're going to do a great job. But appreciate all of the insights and comments and help that you've given me over the last few years as we've worked together through this Bible class. And for those of you who are going into a younger class next quarter, I have schedules. I do need to make some copies of them. But if you'll come to me right after, I'll try to get you a schedule that's laid out for September through November. It's just pretty much this with the dates changed to fit for you to make some plans. So I think we made it to about verse 8. Is that right? Mm-hmm. So we've got Jacob here. He's an old man, and he's brought Joseph and his sons to him, and his sons Manasseh and Ephraim. And so Israel sees Joseph's sons, and he says, "Who are these?" Joseph said to his father, "They are my sons whom God has given me here." And he said, "Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them." Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, "I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your offspring also." Then Joseph removed them from his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand towards Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand towards Israel's right hand. So we need to try to picture this. So Joseph is standing, if I can understand it, face to face with Jacob. And he's got Ephraim in his, so I'm Joseph and you're Israel, right? So Joseph has Ephraim in his right hand. So if I pushed him towards you, he'd be in your left hand. And he has Manasseh in his left hand, and he pushes him towards Israel's right hand. So Manasseh is on the side of, it's actually this side for you, your right hand. He's on the side of authority and power and blessing and honor. Okay, that's the significance of the right hand. So Joseph's pushing Manasseh towards Israel's right hand. And Israel stretched out his right hand, so now I'll just turn around. Israel stretched out his right hand and puts it on who? He puts it on Ephraim. And he stretches out his left hand and puts it on Manasseh. All right? Now, Ephraim is in the position, crisscrossedly, but he's in the position of power and influence and authority and weight. And so Israel, crossing his hands for Manasseh, was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph. So in blessing these sons, he's actually blessing Joseph, right? So I think this is the idea of Joseph getting the double portion. The God before whom my fathers and Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil, bless the boys. And in them let my name be carried on, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. When Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he took his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not this way, my father, since this one is the firstborn, put your right hand on his head." But his father refused and said, "I know, my son, I know. He shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Nevertheless, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his offspring shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, "By you Israel will pronounce blessing, saying, God make you as Ephraim and Manasseh." Thus he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Then Israel said to Joseph, "Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you, and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given you, rather than to your brothers, one mountain slope that I took from the hand of the Amorites, with my sword and my bow. All right. So Israel blesses Ephraim and Manasseh, and he blesses Ephraim greater than he blesses Manasseh, even though Manasseh is the older. Now, I love some of the phrases here. The God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked. I think that idea of walking before God is they lived with an awareness that God was watching. I think that's the significance of that phrase, before whom they walked. The God who has been my shepherd all my life long to this day. You think about all of the times in Jacob's life where God has been watching over him and taking care of him, even when things didn't seem to be going so well. And God was guiding him, shepherding him, directing him. And verse 16, the angel who has redeemed me from all evil. I think the idea of angel there is not in the sense of like a sub-divine angelic being, but another term for God himself. Maybe we're thinking here of like the messenger of the Lord. And notice the word that he uses, redeemed. I think this is the first time that the word redeemed is used in the Bible. And he's talking about the protection and salvation that God has, he's rescued him. And that's the idea that we should have when we hear the word redemption, rescue from slavery or from danger or from evil. And then bless the boys and let them carry on my name and let them grow into a multitude. Now, Joseph is frustrated by this. He tries to straighten this out. But Jacob says no. And the interesting thing is that in Hebrews 11, the Hebrew writer says that when Israel did this, when Jacob blessed Ephraim greater than Manasseh, he did it by faith. So, in the same faith that led Noah to build the ark, that led Abraham to leave his homeland, that led Isaac not to renounce the blessing that he had given to Jacob, even though he thought it was going to Esau, is the same faith that led Jacob to bless Ephraim greater than Manasseh. I take that to be that God had revealed something to him. And that despite the fact that this was not the normal order of things, he trusted God's promise. He saw what God intended to do through Ephraim and did it the way that God said to do it, even though it didn't maybe make sense in light of the circumstances. And yet, if we've read the book of Genesis, we know that the younger being privileged over the greater is no new thing, right? With Jacob himself, and even if you think about Isaac and being Abraham's firstborn by Sarah, but being the second son that Abraham has, you have this trend, and really Seth before that is an Abel, I think, would have been the one through whom, but Seth is younger before that. So on and on and on, you have this story of the younger superseding the older. But this was by faith that Jacob did that, which is interesting. I don't have anything else to say about all that.
Yeah, I mean, Jacob was dim, and even beyond that, he had never met these boys, these young boys, so he didn't know who from who. Mm-hmm. And yet, when Joseph presents them, he crosses over. Right. Yeah. He would have had no foresight to do that, other than inspiration.
That's right. That's interesting. It's good. Yeah, Joseph thinks it's all a mix-up. Like, oh, you think I put them in the wrong place? No. Let me sort that out, and it's not.
And Manasseh, they're going to probably have maybe, would you say, the largest distribution of land in the territory?
Two halves.
And yet Ephraim will probably be more
populous.
Yeah.
Well, and to the point where there are times, like we've studied through Isaiah, and there are times where Israel as a whole is referred to as Ephraim. Ephraim will be one of the designations for that northern kingdom. It'll be known sometimes as Israel, but often as Ephraim, because it's the largest and probably the most influential tribe, and so they come to be known by that. And I would have to look again, but it may be that their territory is right in the heart. So I wonder if not even the capital of Israel would have been within Ephraimite territory.
Do you see verse 22 as prophetic?
Prophetic in the sense that they're going to go take the land again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think.
As it speaks almost as if it's already happened.
Oh yeah.
But
yes, I have given it to you, like it's yours.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So the Amorite thing had already happened. right, that he took, I think he may have already taken it from the Amorite. That hill slope may have been one of the few things that he actually did occupy in. But the giving it to Joseph, I think, definitely is future. Is that the way you took that, or do you think the Amorite thing was in the future too?
Well, I wasn't sure about the Amorite thing.
Well, now that you say it, I'm not so sure. But I took that to be that he has already taken it from the Amorites, but he's giving it to Joseph even though he's not there. And ultimately, Joseph won't be the one getting it, right? It'll be Ephraim, I assume, that gets it because Joseph will die and they'll just take his bones back.
Bob just makes notes. He kind of points this towards the Amorites haven't been judged yet.
Oh.
As a judgment.
Yeah. So he would say that the Amorite this is still a future judgment to come.
Still a future judgment. When he spoke of it in Genesis 15, he told Abraham that, 4 generations after being in Egypt, they would come back and, their iniquity was not full yet. So it would be delayed until that point in time.
Yeah.
So he was pointing towards that.
Yeah. Well, far be it for me to disagree with that. I'm not going to disagree with Bob. So I told you what I thought it said, but if Bob said it said something different. No, I agree that I would say that, no, certainly their ultimate judgment has not come, but I don't think that would preclude taking one hill slope. Their ultimate judgment hadn't come, of course. I agree with that for sure. That's interesting.
Is there a reason that he claims these two as his own?
Yeah, well, so I would say that in him doing that is him recognizing Joseph as the firstborn of sorts. That the way that I think the way we see it is that the firstborn, oftentimes they were given all of the father's possession, but at least a double portion. And we read about that in the scriptures from time to time, a double portion. And I think in blessing both Manasseh and Ephraim and in adopting them as his sons, in reality, what Joseph is getting is 2 inheritances, whereas all the other sons are just going to get 1. Does that make sense? Maybe not. Maybe you can ask me a different question. No. When I can't answer a question, just ask me a different one, and maybe I'll try that. No.
Oh, yeah. That may be answered in the next chapter,
like Reuben
too.
And Simeon, you think maybe? Yeah, I see that.
Even Levi, perhaps,
Levi. Yeah,
because he's not going to get
He's not going to get a portion as far as the land
territory.
goes. And we'll say more about both of those. We will. Maybe replacing. I think I would not say that Levi doesn't get an inheritance. Mm-hmm. There are passages that say the Lord is their inheritance. So there may be a sense, and I think this. I think when the promise is, the blessing is given to Levi, it says you're going to be scattered among your brothers. I think it is ambiguous about whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, because the same thing said about Simeon. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to tread all over 49, but for Simeon, what else do we read about the tribe of Simeon after this? I mean, maybe something somewhere, but not. Well, what do we read about Levi? Well, a bunch. So they're both kind of not dismembered, but dispersed is the word. Dispersed through the tribes. For Simeon, it leads to them being relatively anonymous. For Levi, it ends up being a great blessing because there's Levites spread throughout the country. So I guess I would say perhaps replacing. I think I would lean more towards the idea of Joseph was his favorite from the beginning. Joseph has spent these 100 years, or however long it's been. No, it hadn't been 100 years, 20 years. I don't know where I came up with it. I was trying to do something with Jacob's age. That was nonsense. These 30 years away from the family. I think this may be Jacob's way of acknowledging both his exalted place and the role that he's played in saving the family and all of that. So I don't know what else I'd say about all that. But you may have something else that you were thinking along those lines too. Okay. I tried the shotgun approach. Say a little bit of
scattered abroad,
things and see what happens. Maybe there's some truth in there somewhere. Okay. All right. You want to take 49 before I ruin this whole thing?
What's left of it?
Yeah.
Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you what shall happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob. Listen to Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first fruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity and preeminent in power. Unstable as water, you shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." So Reuben was, of course, the firstborn. And, typically he would be the one to get the double portion. He would be the one to get the birthright. But what prohibits him from getting it? Yeah. Yeah, he went into his father's concubine. And so Jacob has not forgot that. He is defiled in some ways in Jacob's eyes, and therefore he's unworthy of that. What about Simeon and Levi? What's their condemnation? Yeah, I mean that was one of those ugly stories that we were going through, and I remember thinking, this follows the storyline of the judges, the cruelty and just the slaughter of the occasion, and of course Jacob, he was no part of that, and he rebuked them for that. And here again, if Reuben was disqualified, then it would fall upon Simeon next, and then Levi third. But both of them seem to be disqualified here because of their actions against Shechem. And so Jacob, and again, I mean, you look at verse 7, it said, "Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is not cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel." Even though, as Larson said, Levi, it would be a blessing, but, in this text, it doesn't sound like a lot of a blessing. Not on this occasion. Not right now. And of course, Reuben will get a portion of land. It will be a smaller portion, and it'll be on the Transjordan side. Simeon will get a portion, but it will be kind of blended in with Judah's. And of course, Levi will not get a territory. They'll get cities of refuge that will be theirs. And of course, technically, I mean, they will have the honor of, being the priest. And that does bring great honor, but they do not, the condemnation is they don't get a territory. It seems like, in some regard.
I think their privilege of being the priests comes later in some way. Well, Aaron his family was going to be priests, but I think it's after the golden calf when they stand with Moses that they are marked out as an honored group. So I think you're right. I think at this moment it looks bad. At least it looks unsure. I mean, it's bad because it's rooted in something bad, and you're going to be scattered and divided, and it's almost like through their faithfulness they turn what was intended to be a curse into a blessing.
Yeah,
maybe that's.
I think that's probably a good way of putting it.
Yeah. All right, anything through verse 7? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, any thoughts?
All right, let's look. There's two that are longer. I don't know if longer, but they're more detailed than the others. Judah and, of course, Joseph. And that makes sense why those would be the two that were more detailed. Let's read 8 through 12 right quick. "Judah, your brothers shall praise you, and your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as a lioness, who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine, and his donkey colt to the choice vine, He has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine and his teeth whiter than milk. All right. What is prophesied about Judah's family? What are they going to be? The kings. The scepter is not going to depart. You've got lots of different terms that indicate that. The lion, I think we think of that appropriately as the king of the animals, right? I think that's the same imagery. Lots of ancient Near Eastern kings would use lions kind of as their royal symbol. There's 3 different words for lion used in verse 9, all indicating the kind of development and growth of Judah as a lion. The father, son shall bow down for you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. All of those things indicate victory and conquering and rule. Verse 10 is difficult, not because I think it's hard to understand what's being said, but depending on the translation you have, it says about 4 or 5 different things. All right, so I've prepared a PowerPoint on 49, verse 10. So pretty much everybody says something like, the scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. Your text, instead of saying ruler staff, may say lawgiver from between his feet. Anybody say something like that? Okay. I think either way, it's the same basic idea that the authority will be in the line of Judah all the way down. Okay. So the scepter, which would be like the ruling staff, and the ruler staff or the law-giving authority would not depart from Judah. Now, that next phrase is rendered differently depending on what text you're reading from. So the ESV, which is the text that I'm reading from, says, shall the ruler staff won't depart from between his feet until tribute comes to him. So tribute would be like he has subjected nations underneath him, and now they're bringing their taxes. They're bringing their tribute to him. And that fits with the second part of that verse, to him shall be the obedience of the peoples, right? They're bringing their tribute. They're bringing their allegiance. The idea here, as the ESV renders it, is Judah's family is going to rule, and then there's going to come one that people from all the nations bring their tribute to. People from all the nations give their allegiance to and their obedience to, which I think is a helpful rendering of the passage. The New American Standard says it like this: instead of until tribute comes to him, until Shiloh comes. Now, if you're using the King James, it says something like that, right? What about New King James? Does it say until Shiloh come or something like that? Okay, so we'll talk more about that in just a second. So the New American Standard in the footnote says until he comes to Shiloh, or until he comes to whom it belongs. I put a little bitty 1 right there so you can see that's a footnote. Now, that is also a good translation. This probably is the most difficult question of translation in the Old Testament, based on what I can read, about how it should be translated. The Christian Standard Bible kind of echoes that footnote here, until he comes to whom it belongs, until he whose right it is comes. Like, until he comes to whom it belongs, to who has the right to it. And then, of course, the King James Version, until Shiloh come, and unto him shall be the gathering of the people be. I'm going to tell you that of these, I think that the weight probably falls right here with this translation. The footnote of the New American Standard. The New American Standard Bible, if they would have put the footnotes in the actual text, would be one of the best translations that it was ever made. But they continually don't do that. I think here's the idea. Judah's line is going to reign. There's going to be a line of kings that come from Judah. The rulers are going to be from Judah until there comes one to whom it really belongs, whose right of rule it really is. And to him will be the obedience, not just of the nation of Israel, not just of the descendants of Jacob, but of all nations. All right? Now that's powerful. Now, any one of these, I think you get basically that idea, right? Till the tribute comes to him, or till Shiloh comes. There's something about this one that's coming that makes him special. And when he comes, it won't just be an ethnic kingdom. It will be a kingdom of people from all nations. Now, this ties the whole book together. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. There would be a blessing through Abraham's seed to all nations. Well, how is that blessing going to come? I think we get the answer right here. There's a king coming. And whenever somebody gives their allegiance to that king, they receive that blessing that's coming to all nations. So whoever from all nations render allegiance to the king that's coming, to Shiloh coming, to the one to whom tribute belongs, that person will receive the blessing of the promise to Abraham. And I think that's the weight of that verse. And you may not care about the different translations, and it's very difficult to tease out which one is the exact right way to render it, not because, well, for several reasons. The Hebrews did not include vowels in their words. And so depending on which vowels are supplied, so the traditional one is the CSB here, until he who's right it is comes. And the reason that is well, if you want to look at Ezekiel 21 on your own time, you can. 21 verses 26 to 27.
Let me read you another part.
Yeah, I got you.
It says, the sign that his family ruled will not leave his family before the real king comes.
Yeah.
Then many people will obey and serve.
Yeah, I think that's the sense of it. Till the real. So, were the kings of Judah real kings? Yes, but they were only shadows of the for real king that was coming. And when that real king came, he would be kind of the be all. Judah's line will rule until the be all end all comes, the one that all of those kings were pointing to. And I think that's the sense, no matter how it's translated.
Which they're actually in those 4 different versions of God verse talking about Jesus Christ.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Now, and how do we know that? Well, 49:10, this verse here, is never quoted in the New Testament. We know that because of verse 9, the line of the tribe of Judah. And that is applied to Jesus. And this is the only place it refers to Judah being a lion, right? So what in the world is that talking about? I don't think we would know. I mean, I think we would have an idea of who this was pointing to. But we can with certainty say that this promise is pointing forward to Jesus without verse 10, but it certainly applies to verse 10, that he would be the king that would come in the future. Very, very good point. Okay, any other things you'd like to say about the promise? Mostly the things at the end of Genesis 49, verses 11 and 12, with regards to the vine. He ties his donkey up to a vine. What do you have to be in order to tie your donkey up to a vine? Either dumb, because he's going to destroy it, or wealthy, because it doesn't matter. He can just be tied there, and he can eat up all the grapes, and it's no loss to you. Right? This guy uses for his laundry detergent wine, right? Like something that would be precious, and he washes his robes in it, and he is so well fed that his eyes are dark and his teeth are white, and this would be an indication of sustenance and plenty. And he'll have so much wine and milk that his eyes will be like wine and his teeth will be like milk, I think is the idea. Anything else you'd like to say?
When you first started this, a few years ago, when we first started looking at this, there was that class up there. He would say, if I come to your home during the night and I flash a flashlight in your face,
Yeah.
you better go to say this first.
Yeah, that's right. I have it highlighted in yellow just for that reason, because he called it a flashlight point. That's good. I've got Genesis 3:15. If you're going to memorize verses in Genesis, these are the ones to do it with. Genesis 3:15, 12:1 through 3. You don't have to memorize these because you've already got them pretty much memorized with 12:1 through 3. But 26:3 and 4, the promises are repeated to Isaac. 28:13 and 14, the promises are repeated to Jacob. And 49 verses 9 and 10, the promise is repeated, or it's clarified, it's sharpened, and applied to Judah. So those are some good ones to keep in mind. We can throw some other ones in there if we need to, if that's not enough memory work. So, but go to work on those.
So the kings would come through Judah, the priests through Levi, and they both, in a foreshadowing way, would embody the Christ, the
right.
Messiah.
Yeah, I mean, every bit of this. So we miss it if we don't see it, as Mr. Steve said, pointing to Jesus. And we don't get as much detail on the priest yet, but that's going to be as significant in many ways. I think we begin even from 3:15 looking for a king, looking for the one who's coming to win and going to defeat in victory Satan, going to crush evil right at the source. And we're looking for a king, And then as we go through and we see also the problem of sin and the need for sacrifice and forgiveness, that also it's like, well, he can't just come and rule. He has to do something about the sin problem too. And it's not that God just was like, oh yeah, I got to take care of that too, but that we are clued into that along the way. And so we don't have time to talk about all this, but Isaiah 52, the very end, talks about the one who's going to be high and lifted up. That's the king. Well, then in 53, what does he do? He dies as a sacrifice for the people, right? He is king and priest. Zechariah 6, verse 12. There would come one who would wear both the kingly crown and the priestly turban, right? Who in the world is going to do this? How are these roles going to be combined? And they're going to be combined, and we wouldn't know it until we see it, and we see it in Jesus so clearly. Okay, that's great. Oof, beautiful.
We don't have time to go through all these, obviously. You know, a lot of these are descriptive terms. You look down to like verse 19, raiders shall raid Gad, but he shall raid at their heels. You know, Gad, they're going to take a portion on the Transjordan side. It'll be a small portion, but this somewhat describes where, you know, and it may be because of their location, you know, they're going to be exposed and prone to raiding from the children of the east. So that's going to be one of those things that they'll have to deal with. You go to 27, and it describes Benjamin as a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and at evening dividing the spoil. And so it describes Benjamin as the men as being warriors. And as we go through Bible history, we're going to see a lot of occasions where that's going to prove itself so. Whether it's in the Judges when they have to fight the other tribes, the other 11 tribes over, you know, the sin in the camp. And there are other occasions, Ehud, which is the second judge, I think, and you know, he's going to be a warrior. And interesting thing is, for whatever reason, the Benjamites were famous for being left-handed. You know, and there was a saying something about them slinging a stone and how accurate they were in doing that. And they were all left-handed. I don't know really what that's about, but they seem to be warriors. You know, you may have something you want to say about Joseph here.
Well, I would just say this. I think the idea of Joseph is he suffered and was unmoved. I see that in verse 23. Shot at him, harassed him severely, yet his bow remained unmoved. He was faithful even through difficulty. And you have these descriptions by the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, the shepherd, the stone of Israel, the God of your father, the Almighty. Those are beautiful descriptive terms of who God was, who he was for Joseph, and had been for Jacob, and had been for Isaac, and had been for Abraham, and who will be for us. So let's just look at the end there. He blesses these 12 tribes. 33, when Jacob finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed and breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Now, what did he command them regarding? Where would he be buried?
Back in his father's camp.
Back in the cave of Machpelah. He's not going to be buried in Egypt, right? This is not where they're staying. They're going to be going back to Canaan before too long. Just quickly, in the beginning of chapter 50, because there's more we want to say about the middle, Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, so the physicians embalmed him. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many were required for embalming. And the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. I read once that mourning for Pharaoh was 72 days. So if they mourned for Jacob 70 days, that shows you the kind of honor that they gave to him. Not quite as much as their own Pharaoh, but pretty stinking close.
Just short.
Just short of it. So, all right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, and you know, you see the gratitude that they have for Joseph, right? And here's Joseph's father. He would have been kind of like an elder statesman in Egypt by this point. He spent a long time there, even after he arrived, and so maybe had quite the reputation in Egypt, and is mourned for him by them. That's right.
Hey, wait a minute, we go. Back in 49 there.
Yes, sir.
He's doling out the blessing there. And you skipped this verse.
Yeah.
Verse 18.
Hmm.
In the middle of all of that, he said,
Yeah.
I wait on your salvation, O Lord.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that, I said, there's an invitation.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You don't have to come get
No, yeah. Well, I won't, so that you can do your invitation. Yeah. Yeah, and particularly put in the middle of the one on Dan. Like, Dan is no testament to anybody who's named Dan, but Dan is the worst of the tribe. He's just really bad. he's not happy with the inheritance that he's given. He moves off somewhere else. He ends up being one of the very first ones to practice idolatry. It is in Dan that one of the golden calves is set up, probably because of the long history of idolatry that they had already had, going all the way back to Micah the prophet in the days of the judges. He's not really, he's not an outstanding example. Maybe as a person, I don't know about him as a person, but as a tribe, he ends up being pretty bad. And in the middle of that, I wait for your salvation, O Lord. That's good. All right. I think we're ready for verse 4 or so. Well, let's, you want to summarize? They go back and they bury him in Egypt. And I think that maybe verse 15 would be a good place to kind of pick up. If you have a question or a comment about anything in the middle, feel free to ask it. No, they buried him back in Canaan. That's right. Yeah, I did not mean to do that.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us." Of course, this is completely after the burial. You know, they've already went to Canaan, have they not? At this point in time, they've already went to Canaan. So this is after the fact, and they're contemplating, okay, we're not under the umbrella of our father's protection anymore. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of God, of the God of your father." Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Now, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if Jacob actually said this or not. He may have. I don't know. But they're not going to take any chances. And of course, how does Joseph receive this? You know, we've not seen Joseph have any ill will toward his brothers, other than he was very suspicious at the beginning. And we saw him test his brothers to see where they were, if they had matured and grown up and were different men than what they were when they were younger. And he found that to be so. But he hasn't harbored any feelings towards them. But look at verse 20. "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." So he doesn't completely let them off the hook. You know, they've got guilt that they're going to have to live with the rest of their lives over this. And he acknowledges, you meant this for evil. Okay? We're not going to pretend that you didn't mean this for evil. But God turned it into something good, that I could be used as a source of salvation to many people. And, you know, in spite of, we talked about this before, God using a very imperfect people to carry out his will here. And man, that's a lesson for us. You know, sometimes we look at ourselves and we think, I'm not qualified to do this. I'm not qualified to do that. You know, God is not looking for perfection, sinless perfection. Probably none of us arise to some of the, horrors that these young men were a part of. Whether it be selling their own brother into slavery, or whether it's mass slaughter of an entire village, or whatever. God can use you. He can use me. We just have to be willing to be that participant.
Amen. What do you make of his question there? Am I in the place of God? What do you think about that?
Actually, I think it was actually telling them, I'm not God. I'm your brother.
Yeah.
But God took what y'all's evil intent to do harm to me. God took it and made it to be a blessing to save everybody.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's at least part of the idea. I think that's right. I think that he's saying, I'm not in a position to take vengeance in the way that that you think I have the authority to, or think I'm going to. It reminds me of Romans 12 and verse 17. Repay no one evil for evil, but give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I'll repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink, for by so doing you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. I don't think there's a better example, especially in the Old Testament, of somebody overcoming evil with good than what Joseph does. And he was obligated to do so in one sense because of God's designs and God's purposes. But it would have been very easy for him to lose sight of that and to have repaid the brothers evil instead of good. And so even the words he uses here, I'm going to provide for you. I'll provide for you and your little ones. I think about that idea of if your enemy is hungry, feed him. Nobody had acted more like an enemy than these brothers had. And he says, but I'll feed you. I'll give you a drink. And that demonstrates an awareness on Joseph's part of God's care and God's ultimate justice, right? I think Joseph's sense here is, look, I can't get it all sorted out anyway. We don't have the capacity to respond appropriately when it's time to take vengeance anyway. And in addition to that, Joseph says, I can't be mad for long because God used that as the means by which to save people. And so Joseph has good, sometimes I've heard this referred to as 50-20 vision, because it's Genesis 50-20. 50-20 vision is better than 20-20 vision. It's seeing God's purposes at work even in the difficulties of life. And it may be very hard to see in the middle of it, but it is possible to see at the end of it. And for that reason, Joseph says, I'm not in God's place. It's God. I'm going to leave room for the wrath of God. If God sees fit then to bring vengeance when the time comes, so be it. But I think that we would see these brothers as having been penitent and changed through their years of the separation. And then you have God's providence at work. He works all things together for good to those who love him and those who are called according to his purpose, Romans 8:28 says. And in this particular case, he is working all things together for good in order to accomplish the promises that he made to Abraham. And that required, or at least it was God's design in this case, to use the case of Joseph in order to bring that about. But I love verse 21. He comforted them and spoke kindly to them. Another place that phrase, spoke kindly, is used is in 37 verse 4. They could not even speak kindly to him. You remember that when they couldn't have a peaceful interaction. And now, on the other end of this, Joseph is speaking kindly to them when they couldn't speak kindly to him in the first place. Overcoming, again, evil with good and not being overcome by evil.
In verse 18, going back to 37,
Yeah.
They've already bowed before him when they come to buy food, but here again, reaffirming that dream and that prophecy that his brothers would, bow before him.
That's right.
Well, am I wrong, or was that like 17 years ago in the story?
It would have been like, well, I think he's
At least, maybe
I think
longer.
it's 34 years. Well, let me do the math. I'm not very good at this, so y'all just bear with me.
It was 17 years since Jacob came into Egypt.
Yeah, but see, he was in Egypt on his own from 17 to 30. So there's 13 years, and then you add 7 more of the first of the plenty years, and then is it 2 years of the? I think they mentioned that it's been 2 years, and there's 5 left. 2 years maybe before they go down to get bread. So you've got 22 there, and now another 17. So it's almost 40 years at this point. So yeah, but what were you thinking about that?
That's a long time.
Yeah.
To pretend to.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Now that that's up the drum.
Yeah.
About it, and maybe that's why he weeps. It's like, I showed you over the
Right.
years that I.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's a long time to have a guilty conscience like that, for that to be weighing on you. I mean, I think we understand that. We get that. Maybe if you've sold your brother into slavery, you should have a guilty conscience, and let's try to make that right. But if anything, I mean, the things that we do, they weigh on us but this was particularly serious, and they'd had it weighing on it for a long time. So let's just quickly, we're almost out of time, but that's okay because we're almost out of book. 22 through 26. Joseph dies. Where is he buried? In Egypt. But what does he say? When you go, because this ain't home, when you go, you take my bones with you. Another act of faith by a patriarch. They're going to sojourn there for a long time, but it's not going to be forever. And Joseph knows that. And he makes preparation. He commands concerning his bones, the Hebrew writer says in verse 11, verse 22, that God's going to bring you up out of this land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, to this land, to the land. God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So now, maybe the next moment that we're looking for is, when's God going to visit? And when's God going to bring them up out of this land? And that'll prepare us for next quarter. So thank y'all very much for your good. Yes. I would guess so. I mean, I don't know, but I would think so. Yeah.
I've got a question before we close out.
Yeah, sure.
They already took Jacob back to Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
Joseph is not being carried back. Is that a sign of things changing in Egypt, that children of Israel are not able to carry him back to Canaan?
Maybe.
As they did Jacob, he's going to have to remain there for some time.
Yeah, that's true. It may be a demonstration of Joseph's connections to Egypt, right? That perhaps, Manasseh and Ephraim are there. His wife is going to be there, his family, and maybe even more children than Manasseh and Ephraim. So are they going to want some connection to the tomb, to the place? And maybe the Egyptians want some connection to that place because they remember. But it could be a sign that maybe they're not going to be allowed to go as freely. I don't know. It is interesting. He's not going to be buried in Machpelah. He will be buried at a place called Sychar, which is very near the place where Jesus will meet with the woman at the well, in between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. That'll be the place where Joseph is going to be buried. And so that's just interesting for me. All right. Any other comments or questions before we close? If not, Lonnie will have to answer them. And Lucas
covered.
All right. Thank y'all very much.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.